There's retirement crisis in America. It's crisis. Ah! Just ask the experts. They're going to tell you there's a retirement crisis in America. Why do we know this? Because the experts tell us that. Why do the experts tell us that? Because they're the experts and they say there's a retirement crisis in America. But how do they get that information? How are we getting that? And that's what we're going to dive into a little bit here today because it's annoying to me. So don't forget to subscribe. So first thing we do, we go to Google. We say Retirement America, and we're going to say out of reach for most Americans, says the Nationals. I don't even know what that is. Retirement in America is too expensive, says Forbes. Let's see. Why retirement in America has become less attractive. Let's see. There's a couple other things in here. Let's see, but I want to show you this retirement crisis. So if we type in retirement crisis, watch this. We're going to get how many views, how many searches on this per month? Bear with me, just 590 searches per month. The SEC warns of retirement crisis tsunami. Why 80% of Americans face a retirement crisis. There's a retirement crisis as National Affairs. I have to read that because I haven't read it. Americans aren't the only one facing a retirement crisis. And blah, blah. Americans haven't saved enough. The retirement crisis, why 68% aren't saving enough. 1.5 million retirees, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so anyway, the point, and here's the HBR. Americans haven't, I thought this was funny here. So here's the HBR, the Harvard Business Review. Americans haven't saved enough about, and there's this lady, Therese Giladucci. I don't know who she is, but she's a big lib. I follow her around, and she has this new book. How do you sell a new book? You sell it by saying, Americans aren't saving enough as a retirement crisis. Here's the fix. I follow her. She's from the New School. And anyone from the New School, I just discount because I know they're quasi-Marxist. But anyway, so I want to dive into something, though. Here's from the Center for Retirement Research. Heretofore is what I thought was, and I'm not here to write them off yet, but I challenge some of their findings. Let's put it that way. And I want to show you why. And here's one of the articles I'm reading right now that I just did a blog post. So if you haven't subscribed to my blog, you need to let me know. Subscribe to it because I did this blog post, which you can find on heritagewealthplanning.com. The NRRI update shows that half are still falling short, half retirement. And this is just in December 2014. And here they're using a survey of consumer finances, which they say is the gold standard, where before they're using the HRS, which is the health and retirement study, which before was a gold standard. So I'm not sure which is a gold standard anymore, frankly. One was a gold standard in another article I read from the same group, and this one is now the gold standard, the SCF. So I don't know. I just don't know. But they're going to talk about the National Retirement Risk Index, the National Retirement Risk Index, and they show the average share of working age households are, let me make this bigger. All right. It shows the share of working age households who are at risk of being unable to maintain their pre-retirement. And they basically say it's 52% households are at risk. All right. So that's the headline. Half are still falling short. They're able to maintain, what is it? The share of working age households who are at risk of being unable to maintain their pre-retirement standard of living. The pre-retirement standard of living, my friends, is what determines whether or not you are at risk, all right? So if you cannot maintain your pre-retirement standard of living, you are at risk. So let's dive right into what exactly is your pre-retirement standard of living, shall we? All right. All right, so constructing the NRRI involves 3 steps. Projecting a replacement rate, retirement income is a share of pre-retirement income. All right, so again, we're projecting a replacement rate of how much income you need relative to your pre-retirement income. Constructing a target replacement rate that would allow each household to maintain its pre-retirement standard of living, and comparing the projected and target replacement rates to find the percentage who are at risk. All right, so remember, let me just go back here now. So what we're doing here is we're saying we're going to take a pre-retirement level of income. We're going to have a replacement rate of that pre-retirement level of income. And if we're short of that amount, then we are at risk. So I have $100,000 as my pre-retirement income. I'm going to say, and this is what we're going to typically, the typical replacement rate is 80%. So we need $80,000 of income. If we are short of that, we are, in this case, is short of that by 10%. So if all we're able to generate is $72,000 a year and we're shooting for 80%, we're 10% deficient, thus we are at risk. Does that make sense? So again, our pre-retirement level of income is $100,000. We're going to use, say, an 80% replacement rate. So that means $80,000 is what we need to make up to basically be solvent. So we're not at risk. And as long as we're not within 10% below that, in that case, $72,000, we will not be at risk. If we can only generate $72,000 or less, and we have an 80% pre-retirement replacement rate, we are at risk. I hope that makes sense. And there's a lot of methods to the madness here because it gets, it's all right. The exercise starts with projecting how much retirement income each household will have at age 65. Now, this is when I start getting a little bit odd to me. Retirement income is defined broadly to include all the usual suspects plus housing. So I said, okay, what does that mean? So I go down to number one, and let's go see what they're saying for number one here. And we go all the way down to see what they're saying for number one, and because that's their first data set. And number one, the index does not include income from work since labor force declines rapidly with age. Okay, so they're basically saying you're not going to have any earned income. Okay, I got no problem with that. So again, retirement income is defined broadly to include all the usual suspects from housing. And the usual suspects in this case, presumably, are retirement income from financial assets, and housing is derived by projecting assets that household will hold at retirement based on the stable relationship between wealth to income ratios as an age evident in the 1983 to 2013 survey for consumer finances. All right. And basically what we're going to show you here, wealth to income lines from each survey rest virtually on top of one another, bracketing by 2007 values. The fact that 2013 looks very much like 2010 suggests the percentage of risk may not have improved as much as we expect. Using the relationship between wealth and income, financial assets and housing are estimated separately. All right. I don't know what all that means. I'll tell you right now. So they're basically saying, here's our author. We're saying ratio of wealth to income by age from the survey of consumer finances. And they're talking about this quite a bit. Okay. So I mean, literally, I guess this is your age right here. All right. So we're 62 to 65. I don't know what this is over here, and I frankly don't care. So I guess what they're saying is you have 5 times the amount of wealth as you have as income when you're 62 to 65. Okay. What does that mean? Frankly, I don't know. And look, I've read this thing 5 times a Sunday now, and I still can't figure out what this has to do with anything in this report. Is there a reason? I don't know. So let's keep reading this, but they're using this as the context of saying, half are still falling short. And let's just keep going. Using the relationship between wealth and income, financial assets and housing are estimated separately. In the case of housing, the projections are used to calculate 2 distinct sources of income. The rental value that homeowners receive from living in their home rent-free and the amount of equity they could borrow from their housing through a reverse mortgage. All right, that makes sense. Let's keep going down. But here I want to go to number 3 because they have another footnote here. Number 3, what does that mean? So we'll go back to number 3. And let's hit number 2. For both mortgage debt and non-mortgage debt are subtracted from the appropriate components of projected wealth. So basically, they're saying your projected wealth is your total net worth, and net worth is assets minus liabilities, which makes sense. Okay, so again, I know I'm bouncing around here, but bear with me. There's a method to my madness. They're saying your projected wealth to income is they're taking your total net worth, which again subtracts your debt. So in this case, you're 62 to 65. In the year 2007, you had a 5.5 to 1 wealth to income. All right, so you had $50,000 of income. You had that's basically $300,000 of wealth, so to speak, for the average. I'm not sure. I guess is the average person who's, I don't know. Is that the median? Okay, I'm not sure. It doesn't say. It just says, it doesn't tell me who that person is. By the way, they're saying the ratio of wealth to income by age, or maybe it's everybody in its entirety. I literally don't know. But let's say we're 2013. We have a 3 to 1 wealth to income. So we have $50,000 of income. We have $150,000 of wealth. All right. And again, that is net worth, which is the only thing you can use. You can't use assets. You can only use net worth. All right. So that's number 2. Let's go down to number 3 here. And this is where it starts getting a little bit interesting. Number 3, for 401k assets and other financial wealth and housing wealth, the assumption is that current households convert their wealth to a stream of income by purchasing an inflation-indexed annuity. That is an annuity that will provide them with a payment linked to the consumer price index for the rest of their lives. For couples, this annuity provides a surviving spouse with 2/3 of the base amount. While this is critical, my friends. While inflation-indexed annuities are not widely used by consumers, they provide a convenient metric for calculating the lifetime income that can be obtained from a lump sum. And while inflation-indexed annuities provide a smaller initial benefit than nominal annuities, over time they protect a household's purchasing power. All right. Huge qualms with this on that. Let me just go back and show you my mug. I got huge qualms on this. First, no one in the history of mankind has ever, literally since the dawn of the primordial soup from which we all supposedly arise, has said, I got all my net worth, I'm going to turn it over to an insurance company, give me an inflation index annuity with a 66.6% survivor benefit, which simply means when I die, my spouse gets 2/3 of my income. No one's ever said that. Ever. All right. So that might be convenient, but it's not reality. It's not realistic. Number 2, I cannot stress enough the qualms I have with index annuities on the front end, because what happens? Now, this is somewhat trite, but I think it's legitimate. You have go-go, slow-go, and no-go years in retirement. And that's the way financial planners will say, look, from 65 to 75 are your go-go years, from 75 to 85 are your slow-go years, and from 85 beyond are your no-go years. And basically what that it says, the intuitiveness says you're going to spend more on your first 10 years than you will in your next 10 years and then you will in your last 10 years. I completely agree with that. So to have an inflation index annuity means you're spending your income is generated as a whole lot less on the front end when you're in your go-go years. That doesn't make any sense. Yes, it is keeping up with CPI, but that is when you're in your no-go years at 85, 86, 87. And I never, ever did inflation index income annuity. Never. And the reason was because it doesn't pay off unless you survive until you're about 85, 86, 87 years old. And then it pays off a little bit, but not much to justify the lack of it giving you a benefit on the front end. It's nuts. Don't do that. It's insane. I mean, I'm telling you, run the numbers. Unless you're surviving 20 years or so, you won't see a benefit on doing an inflation index annuity. And I don't mean it like a product. I mean by actually saying, I'm going to reduce my front end payment so I can have CPI adjusted inflation in the long run. Because in the long run, at least I'll be keeping up with inflation. That might well be. But in the long run, either A, you're dead, or you're not spending nearly as much to begin with. And C, even if these numbers are right, you still had less income on the front part of your retirement when you're more likely to enjoy it. So I take issue with the entire context of the whole idea of turning over all my net wealth and turning into an inflation index annuity. Everything on that is just silly. And yet that was the premise on determining if you have enough income in which to not be at risk. All right, let's keep going. All right, so so that's the first thing. All right, now we got to project household replacement rates, all right? So let's keep going down on this. Oh, my goodness. All right, sources of retirement income that are not derived from the SCF, Survey of Consumer Finances, reported wealth need to be estimated directly. For defined pension income, the projections are based on the amounts reported by the survey respondents. For Social Security, benefits are calculated directly based on estimated earnings histories for each member of the household. So I like both those. Those things make sense. Earnings prior to retirement are calculated by creating a wage index earnings history and averaging each individual's annual index wages over his lifetime. I got no problem with that. All right, so that's all good. Here, to calculate projected replacement rates, we also need prior income or income prior to retirement. The items that comprise pre-retirement income earnings, the return on 401k plans and other financial assets, and imputed rent from housing. I mean, I don't understand why are we using, so if we're going to have a replacement rate, we have to know what the initial rate is. To calculate replacement rates, we need income prior to retirement. the return on 401k plans is part of the initial income. That doesn't make any sense. You're not spending that money. If I have $100,000, I get a 10% rate of return on my 401k. I have $110,000 tomorrow or the next year. That $10,000 doesn't do anything from an income perspective. Nothing. There's nothing from an income perspective. It just adds to my net worth. I don't get it. And imputed rent from housing. Let me go back again. Why are we using imputed rent from housing as part of your initial income in which to derive an income replacement rate? I literally don't get that. And I looked at the notes and there's no notes to say why we're doing that. This is what drives me crazy. As I said in my blog post, I said, wait a second. All right. Imputed rent from housing. All right. So I own my house outright. All right. And basically, if I were to use this house right here, it costs me $1,500 a month in rent. So that's $18,000 a year. Is that okay? That's $18,000 a year. I don't have to pay. Are we using that imputed? That's what rental income is, imputed rent. In my income of which I have to replace my replacement ratio? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, literally, I don't understand. Like, why would we say, well, Josh, you don't have to pay rent because you own your home, but we're going to impute that income as if you did. Now, they're going to do it on the other end, too, which they're going to say, well, we're going to impute that income as part of your income for replacement ratio. But none of it makes sense. It's completely non-existent on either side of it. And I said it like this, okay. So now I spend $50 a week commuting. All right. I got to fill up my gas tank. Costs $25 twice a week to commute to my crappy old job in Atlanta. All right. So that's $200 a month. I'm no longer commuting. Does that mean that is $200 a month that I'm no longer spending on my commute is imputed income? It doesn't make sense. I don't get it. Why would we use imputed income on either side of the equation, either as an asset base or as a liability base for either retirement when I've drawn down assets or the income base I'm using when I'm in working? It's weird. They don't talk about that. But everything, just real quick, everything revolves around your pre-retirement income. That is the number one factor, because if we're using pre-retirement or post-retirement income needs, then we're going to find we have to define a percentage of pre-retirement income. Everything is based on retirement income, pre-retirement income. If that number is just thrown out there happenstance, then the whole thing is a house of cards. There has to be some legitimacy to that first number, or else all the other things are silly. You can say 2 + 2 is 5 if you do that as part of your equation to figure out how to make a bridge stand in basic civil engineering, and you start with 2 + 2 is 5. Everything else is gone. Everything else is ruined. It doesn't make sense. I don't understand why we're doing this. And on top of that, I got to tell you, pre-retirement income, and I'm not going to focus too much on this in this video because I'm going to in other ones. Pre-retirement income, the Josh before I retire versus the Josh after I retire are two completely different people. Two completely different people. I'm putting braces on people for 4 in the Josh before I retire. I'm having health, lots of broken bones for 4 or for 4 kids, 6 people before I retire. I'm paying for college for these people before I retire. Those are going away when I retire. That's all there is to it. To say now I need a certain level of income based on my pre-retirement income needs, as that will be extrapolated into post-retirement needs, is inherently stupid. It's dumb. It doesn't make sense. Now, can you start saying we don't need these things, that thing, and start extrapolating better data to get a post-retirement income needs? Yes. It's based on what though? Not pre-retirement income needs. It's based on actual expenses that you think you will have in retirement. All right, let's keep going back and we'll stop this. All right, so to determine the share of population that will be at risk requires comparing projected retirement replacement rates with a benchmark rate. A commonly used benchmark is the retirement replacement needed to allow households to maintain their pre-retirement standard of living. And I challenge that whole premise to begin with. People typically need less in their full pre-retirement income to maintain the standard of living once they stop working, since they generally pay less in taxes, no longer need to save for retirement, and often have to pay no mortgage. Thus, a greater share of their income is available for spending. Target replacement rates are estimated for different types of households, assuming that households spread their income in order to have the same level of consumption in retirement as they had before they retired. All right, that's going to consumption spending. My man Larry Kolikoff talks about that. So I want to dive into that a little bit and we'll look at number 6 here, what they talk about. And again, but calculating the index. The final step in creating the index is to compare each household's projected replacement rate with the appropriate target. Households whose projected replacement rates fall below 10% below, like I said, if you have 100,000 pre-retirement, we're going to use an 80% replacement rate, and you only have 70,000, you are at risk because you're 10% below the target, and you're deemed to have at risk. And that's it. That's all they say. That is all they say. They don't say anything about the actual amount of replacement income. They just say here, number 6. Target replacement rates are estimated for different types of households. That's number 5, which we'll talk about, assuming that households spread their income in order to have the same level of consumption in retirement as they had before they retired. So let's go to number 5 and 6, and these are the footnotes. All right. Specifically, the targets are calculated for 1 earner and 2 earner couples, single men and single women with low, middle, and high income weighted to reflect the prevalence of home ownerships and defined benefit pension coverage. What is it? They don't say. They just say specifically the targets are calculated. What is the target percentage? What's the ratio? What is it? What's the actual dollar amount? They don't say. Nuts. Number 6, we recognize that smoothing consumption is not the same as smoothing the unobserved marginal utility of consumption that theory suggests. But our method likely provides a reasonable approximation. But they don't say what it is. All right, so factors that and they talk a lot about the markets not being good, and so all right, let's just look at the housing issue because that's a big house price. See, they're looking at house prices and they're just saying that I've read this. There's decline in interest rates, the market's not doing great, house pricing being low. All this stuff. So when viewed by any age, the most notable fact is lack of any improvement for households 50 to 59. This pattern reflects 2 developments. First, households age 59 are exposed to the full impact of today's low interest rates, are then tapered over a 10-year period. So the households under 50 are not affected. Second, the retirement assets of households age 50 to 59 decline significantly to about 110,000. And this is percentage of households at risk. But just says, it says percentage of households at risk. But what at risk of what? They're saying, 52% of households at risk, but it doesn't say what they're at risk for. It's nuts. Now this, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, okay, good. They're going to tell us what the household income that we need to replace is. No, they don't. They don't say it ever. They just say we have some author's calculations. All right, when viewed by income, all groups experience a modest improvement, see table 2. For the low-income households, the gain they experience from rising house prices offset primarily by the increase in Social Security. Again, percentage of households at risk, and this is 2010 and 13, age 55. Percentage of households at risk by income and group. So higher income, 40. It doesn't say. It's nuts. All right, so lastly, I did like this one. This goes back to my simplest retirement plan ever. Percentage of households at risk at age 65 by pension coverage. If you have a defined benefit plan, you are not at risk. Now, again, I challenge the whole premise. I challenge it, but this right there gets to the crux of the matter. In 2013, only 20% of the people were at risk. Whatever the author's calculations to determine at risk is, I don't know, and you don't know either. But in 2013, only 20% of the people who had a defined pension were at risk. And that's the same essentially as 2010. Thus, having a pension, I'm just telling you, as I go back all the time, pension plus Social Security, pension plus no debt means no risk to retirement. It's all that simple. All right, so conclusion. Today's working households will be retiring in a substantially different environment than their parents did. The length of retirement is increasing, According to the 2013 SCF, median 401k balances were about 110,000. Yes, the stock market is up, The NRRI shows that as of 2013, more than half of today's households will not have enough retirement to maintain their pre-retirement standard of living, which we have not defined. The NRI clearly indicates that many and this is the thing that just ticks me off. The NRI clearly indicates that many Americans need to save more or work longer. No, it doesn't indicate that at all. And the reason it doesn't indicate that at all, because you don't give us the point we're shooting for to begin with. It doesn't. You give us calculations, but you don't say, you give us your author calculations, but you don't say at all what that is. You don't. It just says we're at risk. Why? Because we're calculating we're at risk. Thus we're at risk. No, that's bull crap. You got to have more than that. And on top of that, the whole thing, man, I'm telling you. All right, so I'm going to do a video today because I'm fired up on this stuff. And I'm going to show you. And we're going to use the median income from the CPS, which I hate to do, but you got to do it because the median income is underwhelming relative to the actual income. And we're going to show you that because the CPS is actually pretty good for working careers. And I'll get into that here in just a little bit. If you're not following me on this, that's fine. Just watch my next video where I show you. But when it comes to actual income streams other than IRA distributions, the CPS is pretty good. And so because the CPS is pretty good, which flows into the amount of income you receive before you retire, we can use those numbers to extrapolate this incredibly important piece of data, which I'll show with you. And I'll make you happy because it's just the proof is in the pudding, and I'm going to show it to you. So subscribe, share. If you want to support the podcast, share. I'm telling you right now, stay tuned, and comments and thumbs up always help, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.